We are Vineyard.
Being able to sit in people's living rooms or their office at their church or their favorite restaurant in their town and hear their story when the pain comes out. And some of it was caused by their experience with the Vineyard too, and be able to say, I understand I wasn't there, but I represent the Vineyard. And I just want to say, I'm sorry that was your experience, or I'm sorry that happened. It's powerful. I've seen people tear up. I've seen other people, when I just say, I'm sorry. On behalf of the Vineyard, I'm sorry that no one called or whatever, And again, there's no people or there just wasn't the structure.
No bad guys.
No bad guys here.
Right.
Or just to say, some people say, it doesn't matter. And I'll just say, it does.
It does matter.
And something that's helpful to hear that. It's almost like a healing tour, like just listening and hearing things. And sometimes, people make bad decisions and they end up getting hurt by their own decisions. But to have somebody to just listen and say, let's help you through that.
Welcome to the We Are Vineyard podcast, conversations to help us grow with Jesus and each other. In today's episode, Jay Pathak will be interviewing John Elmer, one of Vineyard USA's super regional leaders. Let's listen in.
All right, John, thanks for joining me for us to do another We Are Vineyard together.
That's great to be here.
It's been a long time since we did this, because when we did it before, I got to hear your whole story and, bongs and Jesus and
I'm impressed you remember that.
How could I forget it? It's burned. It's burned in. So if anybody didn't hear John's story, you can go back and you can listen to it because it's well worth listening to. And I think actually the other part I've thought about a lot since was the sort of like ad hoc youth group where you're like grabbing furniture from the alley, like sticking it in this random like building you found. And this poor church has no idea what contagion they've let loose in their own church. So great.
Yeah, it was. Now, as a seasoned senior pastor, I'm thinking, oh my goodness gracious, what did I put those poor folk through?
Totally. And I'm sure because I know you, that youth leader still lives in you. So I'm sure there's a part of you that's like, I would love to hire that guy.
I would. I'm looking for him all the time.
Exactly. Like he's crazy, but man, I could use some of that juice again. I know you still have that. So you act like you've learned your lesson, but you certainly have not. Yeah, exactly. Well, so we're coming together after years now. We've worked together at this level. We're going around talking to different folks on the team and saying, okay, what do you think you learned? What's been surprising? What's been the nature of the work? Because as we stepped into these roles, we didn't even know what we were agreeing to, frankly. They made sense. They were continuations of ministry, but we didn't quite know what the breadth and the scope of them would be. And so now you have been in this for a few years doing this work.
Over 3.
Yeah. And so first, let's just start with maybe what has the job entail for you? You're a super regional leader, which to this day, we are upset with ourselves. We cannot come up with a better name. It's led to many, many good jokes. Okay, for what it's worth. Like it's brought a lot of humor. There's capes and lots of things. So I wish to this day, I still don't. By the way, still no one has a better name. Everyone still likes to make fun of it. I'm like, okay, what do you suggest? They're always like, I don't know. So, but what has that role entailed? Like what have you been doing mostly?
Yeah. First two, having the name super regional leader is so awkward to type in any email when I'm introducing myself. It's kind of embarrassing. But it also, every time anybody introduces me, they get 5 good laughs out of it.
Exactly.
So I'm talking to a crowd of people who are already in a happy mood. So it has its wins and its losses.
This is true. Yes.
Yeah. So what has the job been? A lot of getting time to get to know the incredible women and men who lead in a vineyard.
Yeah.
And all over in every nook and cranny. Like I put in a fair amount of miles and hours traveling,
Yes.
and it's been great. Like, so a big part of my job was listening and hearing the stories and seeing the landscape and trying to discern it with a new set of eyes. So that's been a big part of the job.
Which is like airlines, driving. You've driven in parts of the country I bet you never imagined you would traverse, hours and hours driving around to small towns and the middle of a place you never thought you'd go.
Well, I've put on, according to United, I've put in over 250,000 miles on planes, but then the driving, like, those maps with Verizon that say we cover 98% of the. I've been in those 2% where my phone goes dead, and I guess, which is good for the soul. Like, okay, I can't make any calls.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna enjoy the thing. So
yeah, you have, and what's interesting is you already had been a regional leader. So in other words, you'd had a role where you worked overseeing, groups of pastors, even not just pastors individually, but groups of pastors that spanned over many states. So it isn't like you hadn't done some level of oversight already, and in a region that, works pretty well, really connected, lots of good things going on. What's been different in the sort of regional to super regional shift? Like, because it isn't like you weren't unfamiliar with the conversations or the kinds of things you're observing, or what's changed by way of like the way the work works?
Yeah. So when I oversaw and was the regional leader at the East, that was great. It was a very healthy region, and there was a similarity overall, though.
Mm-hmm.
But going across the country, and all the different nooks and crannies that both Joel and I find ourselves in, is you see a breadth of experience. You see, you're in a city that has a whole different mindset than, where I grew up, or I've gotten to see Vineyard principles displayed in lots of different contexts with lots of different kinds of leaders. So getting that view of the breadth of the Vineyard, the variety in the way people embrace Vineyard values and do them is been exciting, actually. And I'm putting these all away because I'm saying one day if I get to be a lead pastor again, if I get to plant one more church, I got all kinds of ideas now.
That's so great.
Yeah. So that's been a big thing. And another change is seeing the wider leadership, and seeing different levels of leadership and being part of the national team actually has helped me grow as a leader. Like for me, that room, I have high respect for everybody sitting around our table.
Yeah.
And each one of them has stuff that I say, man, I wish I had that. Like that's really great, that gifting they have, or that knowledge they have, and I want to learn from them. And being around people that I respect that much actually is helpful for me to grow as a leader and as a human.
Yeah, and you and I were talking about this before we hit record, is it's possible that you and Joel have more depth and breadth of awareness of Vineyard pastors and churches than anyone has ever had in the history of the Vineyard. I mean, seriously, because when you think about people who occupied the kind of work you're doing right now, they were always volunteers. So even a regional leader, even an area leader was always a volunteer role. Frankly, even a board member was a volunteer role. And the vast majority of people that took on those volunteer roles were leading usually fairly large churches. So they were pretty busy. They're managing a lot of staff, preaching week in and week out, leading teams of teams just in their local church. So as a regional leader, let's say in the East, you probably didn't get to see almost any church functioning on a Sunday. I mean, maybe occasionally, maybe a few times a year. You rarely got to interact with their staff in their staff context. Very rarely. Maybe, let's say even maybe a few more times a year. Maybe. Whereas now, you're doing that pretty much continually. Like you're in this with staff, with leaders, in their context, in a Sunday environment, in an environment where they're even maybe with lay leaders. I mean, I've been in area meetings with you where you've already been there for 2 or 3 days or whatever. And then I'm there for like one meeting, but you're like, oh yeah, I taught it there Sunday. And then I'm going to do this with this staff this day. And then I'm going to meet with these 3 pastors in their church that day. And then I'll go to dinner with some of their team, their board, and then I'll teach at the next church on the Sunday. So the level of exposure, the depth of exposure, and then the breadth also, you're getting to churches that, you and we've sat with churches that are like, we've never had a single Vineyard leader visit us, ever. And we've been in church 40 years or whatever. Tell me a little bit about what that experience has been like. That's like a different role than we've ever had. I mean, even Wimber didn't really do that. He still had his own church. And so what's that been like?
Yeah, first of all, it's an incredible privilege because no one's had the opportunity to do that. Like my role, Joel's role part of it is to connect with all these churches and build relationship. And we don't have a home church to have to split our time with. And so that it is quite a privilege. And like national directors who put in tons of miles and time and, almost worked themselves to death, they had 12 other things they had to do. Like that was just one lane, where now there's 2 of us in this lane that's a big part of our role. So that's a great privilege to do. And, and seeing all that's going on, like last month, I got to go to Minnesota, and I hang out with Gary Dawkins and his staff, and great church there. They're doing Mercy and great staff, and then get to do that, and then visit a bunch of churches, and then also preach at Mercy, and so like you are saying, I got to see all the different levels. I got to meet people in the congregation and their staff and their board, and there's a depth of opportunity to hear what's going on and to be able, when something comes up, to be able to have relationships so they have an outside voice that's trusted. Is really good. And you just multiply that over the couple hundred churches that I've been at.
Well, and I think it what I notice is it also works with the regional leaders. So regional leaders had some limited investment from a national director historically, but now you guys are able to invest in them. Those 9 regions, those regional leaders have a lot more connection to you, to each other, and you're able to take on a lot of work for them or on their behalf that is maybe more complicated or more disciplinary or a little trickier to manage. So that's even enabling them to feel more connected to the Vineyard and to their churches, because you're clearing a lot of the debris. There's a lot more reporting and ability to keep up with stuff. I mean, so the breadth of that, there's a breadth of like churches we didn't know how to, but there's also a depth of, man, we just know more. We're connected more. We're more aware of what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, the regional team, like I was a regional leader for 11 years before, so I understood what was before.
Yep.
It wasn't necessarily a team. It was, we had these roles, and now there's a sense of, because we have time now as super regional leaders, but we've build a monthly time where we do training. We do retreats with the regional leaders. There is a sense of connectedness. There's a sense of empowerment. And you're right. If there's things that maybe, this is gonna take way too much time for a regional leader, we could step in and say, hey, we'll help out with this, or here's the
Yeah.
way to streamline this, or there's and with the area leaders as well, there's way more communication and cross communication, and that really is making us a stronger movement, a healthier movement.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Church planning has always been tricky sometimes because somebody might drop into a whole different region or area that no one knew them at. Sometimes there's situations that we've been able to help, like, somebody's moving across the country and the region they're coming from is not so sure they should be church planning, but the region receiving them has no idea.
Yeah.
But since we have our feet in both, in our hands all around the different areas and hear the communication, we're able to facilitate communication that, like, hey, let's not skip these hoops. These are important steps and important questions to answer. And I think what happens then is we will have healthier church plants that'll be more successful because there's a wider support network for them.
Yeah. Connectedness. Yeah.
Yeah.
The ability the handoffs are a little clearer. The gaps are easier to see so that we can be more helpful. So tell me more about that, John. So, like, from your perspective, you come into this job thinking, okay, I'm basically going to help churches do better. You have whatever you think that means. What is it, now you have 3 years under your belt where you're like, okay, this part I didn't expect, or this is different than I thought it was going to be. What have you learned with all this breadth and depth? Like, what would you reflect back to a local pastor or leader? Like, let me tell you kind of what I've learned about the Vineyard.
Yeah. So there's good and bad. Let me start with the good.
Okay, good. Yeah.
There is such a wide variety of the way Vineyard churches have taken Vineyard values and engaged their community and their gift mix in a way that's unique and powerful. Like, we go to different Vineyard churches, and I don't know if I've run into a Vineyard church yet that has not been caring for the poor. Like Wimber in the beginning, like, hey, you can't be a Vineyard if you don't care for the poor kind of idea. And that was a deep value. And it is across the spectrum. Now, they do it in very different ways, lots of churches.
Right.
But it's almost always there in a church. And it's great to see how each church is thinking about how can we serve people in our community. Same with how they move in the Holy Spirit. There's all kinds of different ways. And that's universal again. But so seeing a breadth of experiences and how universal our values have been embedded. Like, the vast majority of vineyards, like care for the poor or move in the Holy Spirit, the vast majority are like, we care about the Word of God. We're about works and the Word and the works, and they've caught it. So that part's been great to see in the variety of way it plays out. I think one of the things that our role has allowed us to see and to engage, though, and this is on the hard side, the painful side, is the level of pain that has been unattended sometimes in our movement. And it's been buried. That's been just because we're busy, we don't notice or don't have the time to deal with. And so there's been long-standing conflicts in areas that were said, no, we need to address that. Regional and area lines changed because of relationships, and not instead of let's heal the relationship and do what's practical for the the line. Let's ignore the geography and just not make people face each other. And so healthy families deal with their issues, and we're now have the time, we're seeing the issues and addressing them. And so there's relational pain, there's just life pain, that having someone in the wider Vineyard family to say, I care, or I'm there, or just listen to the story, or to send a fruit basket or something, like I'm part of something bigger. We can address those places of pain in more ways now.
Yeah, and it is like any family, right? Like there's a way you understand a family if you watch them at a distance. Then there's a way you understand a family if you actually have dinner in their home every once in a while. There's a whole different way you understand a family if you moved in. and you live with them for 6 months, and or you visit their family reunion, or you're with them during a funeral or a wedding. I mean, you and I, and probably a lot of the people on this who are pastors, do weddings. You learn a lot about a family when you do a wedding. You learn all kinds of little nuanced things about Uncle Joe and, Aunt Mabel and grandma's tension with the one cousin, or, whatever, right? Like those things surface in a wedding or in a funeral in a way that they might not even in a family reunion. And so in some ways, what you and Joel have been, granted the privilege and maybe the great responsibility of is of moving in a little bit more. You get to see how that staff really works, or what's going on in this area, that these vineyards don't talk to each other or don't even want to be in the same room. Oh, that's an old story. Oh, that's from 10 years ago. That's from, the way that church was planted. Or, oh, that's because they're friends with the pastor who used to be there, who they think was fired in a way that wasn't fair, or whatever. But those things just kind of lay dormant because we're all busy, we're all doing stuff. You guys are now in the middle of all kinds of stories and experiences and history that you just weren't aware of. Frankly, probably no one was aware of, because you're just, everyone's trying to, and part of it's good. People are doing their best. They're just trying to be nice, good soldiers. Like, yeah, it's fine. I'll just do my thing over here. But as we're trying to build more unity and connection and, awareness of things we can do together, some of that stuff surfaces. And so what are you finding that's helpful? What's helping you engage in some of that work? What's enabling you to feel like, okay, yeah, we're moving the ball here?
Yeah, I think there is a couple of things. One is being able to sit in people's living rooms, or at their, in their office at their church, or their favorite restaurant in their town, and hear their story. And when the pain comes out, and some of it, was caused by their experience with the Vineyard too, and be able to say, I understand I wasn't there, but I represent the Vineyard, and I just want to say, I'm sorry that was your experience, or I'm sorry that happened. Is powerful.
Yep.
And people have, I've seen people tear up. I've seen other people, when I just say, I'm sorry, on behalf of the Vineyard, I'm sorry that no one called, or whatever, and again, there's no, people were there just wasn't the
no
structure.
bad guys.
No bad guys here.
Right.
Or just to say, some people say, it doesn't matter. And I'll just say, it does.
It does matter.
And something that's helpful to hear that. So I think that's been a big part of, it's almost like a healing tour, like just listening and hearing things. And sometimes, people make bad decisions and they end up getting hurt by their own decisions. But to have somebody to just listen and say, let's help you through that. And so that's been a big part of the process. Being able to give resources. There's now more resources we have as a movement because of the great work the A&Ds are doing.
Yep.
And to be able to say, hey, here's the EF stuff. Here, this would really be helpful for you, maybe, or for your church, or here's a financial cohort that can help you in this process, or whatever the resource is that we have.
Yeah.
It's great to be able to connect people to those.
Yep.
And see them benefit from them.
Well, and we just did, some time in Orlando. We had Ken Sandy in the kind of the peacemaking training. We're creating more and more tools, modules, ways of relating that enable people to just work out rifts and conflict and challenges, and because these things happen when we're in ministry. I mean, there's a way of thinking about ministry that's you're choosing to take on mess that's not yours. Like that's what it means to do this job of leading. Like most people have a hard time just doing their own lives. I mean, I know I do. I know you do. Or getting your laundry done, making sure you got your workout in, you walked the dog, you did the dishes, like that's a lot. There's a lot to just do your life. Then you commit to being in a family. So now I'm doing that for my daughters or my spouse. And then I've got a few friends. If you just add up that amount of work, that's a lot of work to get that right. Like to be, and then have a life with God, somewhere in there. And you're like, you know what? And then I'm going to take on some other people's hard stuff. I'm going to get in the middle of their own life with God and their relationships and their conflict and how they behave at work and how they manage their money. And I'm not going to do this with a few people. I'm going to do that with like groups of people. And we're going to gather and try to help people with that. I mean, so like
and then on top of that, one of the things we've done that is really good is gotten a third-party reporting line.
Right,
so we've not only just said, hey, we'll find these as we travel. We're saying, no, here is a way to communicate to us, and so everybody can be heard and seen.
That's right.
That, when we made these roles, I don't think we saw all that coming.
No.
And it's been a growing period. We're learning how to do this better.
Yep.
I've made mistakes in it. I'm sure others have too. But we're getting better at it. And I think more and more people are feeling heard. And we're getting the things before they grow into a whole mess too. Like earlier, we're helping, one of the satisfying things is to sit with a board too and help a board wrestle with an issue. And then it's not like giving them the answers, it's teaching them how to think and giving them some tools and building the muscles. And so 3 years down the line, when something happens, they'll be way better prepared to handle it.
Yes.
So I love we're doing that part of it. That's kind of the Vineyard thing of everybody gets to pay, empowering other people and training people to be able to do the role. That's part of, I think, Joel and I's role as super regional leaders, and the A&D's giving the tools to do that, and all those pieces is we're raising the quality of not only our lead pastors and not only their staff, but also their boards.
This summer, Vineyard USA is hosting our national conference, Melody and Harmony, in 2 locations: Denver, Colorado on June 16th through 19th, and Cincinnati, Ohio on July 14th through 17th. We hope that by offering 2 locations and dates, everyone, pastors, leaders, volunteers, even those just curious about the Vineyard, that everyone will be able to find a time to join us. The conference will also have specific programming for adults, youth, and kids. As far as our theme, throughout history, the Lord has been composing a beautiful melody through the story of his people and his church. And for the past 50 years, the Vineyard movement has had the privilege of adding its own unique harmony to this grand symphony. Registration's now open, so make sure to check out vineyardusa.org to learn more and register today.
So what would you say if you're looking across the board, you're looking at pastors and leaders, and you want to say, hey, here's something that I didn't realize, but I find myself saying a lot. Like, hey, pay attention to this, or here's a skill set you probably need to develop. Maybe even in yourself, you're like, here's something I've learned. I've needed to grow in order to lead at this level. Or something you just find yourself returning to a lot. Like, hey, local pastor X, you mentioned like boards, like, here's some ways to think about your board differently, or here's something I want to tell you to think about with your own life. Do you find yourself kind of going to the same bag, or is it completely different? Are you noticing trends you kind of keep returning to?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things, but I think if there's a trend, encouraging lead pastors to have a circle they're talking to early on.
Mm-hmm.
When you kind of have that little, I wonder what's going on in my life, or that I'm starting to feel worn out, or to have some people that they can trust to be around and really be honest with what's going on. So some of that, and for boards maybe to be proactive with, seeing the health, thinking not just nuts and bolts of what the church is doing, not just whoever their leadership circle is, kind of helping people stay fresh in their relationship with Jesus and their marriage, with their kids.
Yeah.
The earlier on those conversations are happening, the less likely it's going to blow up in a really bad place.
That's good.
So I think that's part of what I'd encourage people to do.
That's good. How about you? Like, if you could be a part of your own training for this role. So, okay, I get to go in a time machine and tell John, hey, John, you're about to take this role. I'm coming from 3 years in the future. Here's what I want to tell you that is going to be helpful to you to kind of up your learning curve, to help you be better in this job. How would you coach yourself?
That's a good question. Is this a therapy session, or just turn off the button? This would be great. No.
Well, it's just...
No, it's a good question. I can think of 2 things right away.
Yeah, do it, yeah.
The first one was, I think anybody, if I end up training someone to take this role, or you guys, the next person, whoever, I was surprised how long of a grieving process it was for me to give up my role in the local church. I loved my local church. I love the role. It's such a great privilege, and I love being a local church pastor. And you get to do the baptisms, you get to preach, you get to cast vision and see something come to your fruition. And this isn't quite like that. I've never had a baptism as a super regional leader. I'm with pastors. I don't get to lead people to the Lord. I miss that stuff like crazy.
Yeah.
So there was anybody I would say to 3 years ago, John Elmer, is you're going to have to work through the grief. There's going to be lostness. The other thing is, my rhythms were blown up. As a lead pastor, I had very neat, clean rhythms. I had my it was at their Sunday's message. I knew it's coming 6 more days. When I had the Thursday night early weekend service, it was 4 more days and another message to do. And so you're just in the rhythm, and there's a grind to it, but there's a healthy rhythm to it too.
Yep.
I could never wander that far. I knew what to expect. It was coming. And when you're traveling and you're working not with a community, which is really hard, you're not in the office with the same crew. We're spread across the country. I lost rhythms and I lost community a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's the price. And I can't speak for other people on the national team. That's the price I felt like I lost.
That's good.
Rhythms
That's
and
important.
community. Yes. And I'm working to figure out, how do I do those on the road?
Yep.
How do I do those in a schedule that's no month is the same?
Yeah. That's true. Well, and the first thing you said about the grief part, it's such an interesting problem, isn't it? Because, let's talk about grief like with a spouse, like, because, grief is loss. All change is loss, even good change. So, but let's think about a spouse. Like if you talk to a spouse who lost their wife, let's say, and you're like, man, this has got to be hard. And they're like, no, fine. Things are great. You'd be like, oh, well, yeah, but you loved each other and you had dreams. Yeah, but I don't know. I got a lot of free time. Things are great. You'd be like, that's really weird. So in other words, sometimes the depth of the grief helps you to realize how good it really is, how much grace there really has been. In other words, when there's a lack of grief, that's almost a different kind of an indicator. That's a different problem.
Yeah, I think that's key. I think that's one of the things that's made this national team. Some of the things they've done have been great, and is that everybody on our national team loves their local church.
Yeah,
and probably would rather be in that local church setting,
Right.
And when that changes, I tell people, you don't have to worry about this generation. You probably don't have to worry about the next generation of the national team.
Yeah.
It's that third generation
Right.
where it can get wonky. And I think it's important that we always look for people who love the local church.
Yeah.
I get up in the morning and I get on another plane or do whatever we got to do or deal with this problem. Because the bottom line, I love Jesus and I love the local church.
Yeah.
And that kind of keeps me in the game.
Yeah. And in that sense, the grief you're describing is a good sign. It's a healthy sign. When you read, I've obviously processed this a lot, even because I'm also on the national team and had to make changes. I mean, when you read the Apostle Paul, you do read him feeling what you're describing. He's grieved that he can't be with them. I don't think that's just him trying to be polite. I think he's like, yeah, guys, I know I said I'd be there and I haven't been able to get there because I'm doing this other thing. And I'm torn apart. And you're in my prayers, and make sure you greet these particular people who I really care about, who I've not seen recently. I remember the last time I was with you, we talked about this thing, or I got to experience this with you. And just know I'm carrying that with me. And in one sense, he's been called to something. There is an extra local call on his life. Part of the call on Paul's life is to keep moving. Like, you got to keep doing the next thing. That's what God has asked you to do. But part of that call is to bear a certain kind of suffering, because he likes the churches. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there's some churches he's more than happy to, glad I'm done here for now. I love them, but I'd prefer to move on. But you the impression in the letters, he's like, oh man, I'm really grieved and I really care. And you're right. That's probably healthy. If we ever got to the point where there's teams like, yeah, I don't know, whatever. I just got to write this thing, then I got to like film that thing, and I got to like make sure that this part of the church planning process works and whatever. You'd be like, that's not a good sign. There should be some of that sense of when you're home, I'm really trying to be home. I want to be in this church. I want to be connected again. And we've talked about that a lot with our team. Like, you have to be pastored locally. This team will not supplement that. Like, no matter how hard we try, I am not your pastor. You still need local pastors. And so I hear that. That's really, really good. And that second thing's really good, because I think part of what you're describing, John, isn't just local to extra local. It's change of any kind. So when you go from being, let's say, a church of 200 to a church of 400, or bivocational to now a full-time pastor, in that change, it changes all your rhythms. Just that changes all your rhythms. Like, oh, wait a minute, I have to like redo how I'm doing this. How do I have my quiet time differently? How do I form my friendships differently? In what ways is my staff, do I have responsibility to challenge versus pastor versus coach? I mean, those things change at every change in someone's life. They have to get reconfigured. And I know for you, having been in a growing church, you had to reconfigure all that stuff. But this is just another one of those jumps. I mean, I think about retiring pastors. The amount of retired pastors I talk to, they're like, I got these sermons I'm still generating, because I had this like sermon generating machine on the inside that I just keep turning this crank, and I don't even know I'm doing it. I'm watching a movie and I'm thinking, oh man, that's interesting. That'd be a good illustration for this. And then it occurs to him, well, I don't even have anywhere to preach. Like, why am I generating teachings? I have nowhere to do this talk. That's a weird feeling.
Yeah.
Like these machines that are well oiled and they've been honed to produce certain kinds of things are no longer, there's no place for them. There's no output. So then, okay, how does that change my devotions and my reading of the Bible, or what it means to sit with a young couple over dinner? I don't have a responsibility to coach them. I have a responsibility to care for them. I'm a grandfather. I'm not the boss who's trying to build the next 4 small groups.
Yeah.
Those are weird moments.
It is. And the more I kind of understand my role and the value of some of the things I do, it helps me process that.
Yeah.
So I don't get to score the touchdown, if you will, but I get to know, hey, maybe I was helped somebody think that formation differently so they could score the touchdown. And taking more grandparenting, or this second level. My most refreshing times is when I get to talk with a pastor and help them think through things or her through things, and or see light bulbs go off about something. Those are sitting with a staff and brainstorming how do you develop leaders. Those are fun times.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of, to use the analogy I used a moment ago, you're dusting off the old machinery a little bit, going, oh, okay, I still have, this thing still does what it used to do. Let me help you think through that small group thing, or how you're trying to solve this problem with this one leader, or you have a staffing issue there. You have how should you raise money for that, or think about a building a certain way, or all those gears still work. They just work different now because the role has changed. That's interesting. And then what would you tell yourself by way of like the work itself? Like, here's some stuff you're going to have to do. Here's some tools that you might want to develop. Here's some resourcing that you're going to want to have in your back pocket. So I thought I was going to step in as super regional leader. I'd be doing these 3 things. Well, I've ended up doing these other few things that
I am learning, as a local church pastor, you have a lot of opportunity to cast vision.
mm-hmm,
And I was kind of vision-led leader type.
mm-hmm,
And it's a little different in this role, in the seat I sit in. I don't have that privilege. I don't have that time and to do those things. But learning how to help hear people's vision or vision around some of the Vineyard values overall.
mm-hmm.
So I'm learning how to incorporate those into conversations and help people see big picture. So that's part of it. I think learning to really listen to what the story is. And I find myself now getting better at, like, before I have an answer, tell me your story.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm getting better at that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty important in this role. And I think I'm learning how to, I have a lot place to grow, but learning more about being trauma informed and handling those situations in a more healthy way.
Yeah. No, I mean, as I've watched you, or I've thought about what you guys do, the level of complexity of sort of conflict and pain and challenge is so much more complex when you're thinking about leaders and leaders relating with leaders, boards and finances, and it's sort of like the most complicated thing you manage as a small group leader is way different than if you're a staff member, is way different than when you're a senior pastor, because by the time it gets to your desk, it's gone through everybody else's desk, so that the kinds of...
I'm not getting the easy ones. Hey, Judge Jay, if I get, we're passing on to you. So God bless you, man.
Well, that would be what I've watched. I've watched you and Joel take on entrenched, highly complex dynamics. Some things that are 20 years old. So for 20 years, this really entrenched offense, complex challenge has just sort of lived in this area or in this region or in this church. And it's not basically surfaced and nobody's really been aware of it. But now that we have more depth and breadth, now that we're more connected, now that we're calling the Vineyard to rise a little bit, like, hey, we're gonna work on stuff. Well, now you've touched this mine that nobody's been able to disarm. Like so basically people have figured out how to plow around it. Like, let's just don't walk over there. Like, there's stuff over there. You'll catch on fire. Something will hit you.
Don't talk about Bruno.
Yeah, totally. And here we are, like, hey, we have a hotline. Call. Anything comes up. We stuff that's been really difficult and has not worked well at a local level, or even all the way, maybe you reported that nobody did anything. We would love to know about that. We'll take that on. And we're going to dive all the way in. We're going to move in. We're going to talk to everybody, see how it's going in this region, this church. And then we're going to, it has brought a level of complexity, emotion, challenge. We're not going to just sweep this under the rug. We're not going to move the bump in the rug. Not sure what it is. We'll move it over there. And I don't mean just at the level of sort of what would be criminal or abusive behavior. I mean stuff that's even miles below that. Like, hey, it seems like you've just been sad or disengaged. You haven't been engaged in your area, or we've not seen you at a national conference last year, or maybe over the last couple of years. Is everything okay? What's going on? And the courage you have extended and Joel's extended to sort of wade into that stuff and take it on is making us so much healthier as a movement. It isn't just the incendiary stuff that kind of blows up. It's the more subtle disagreements and gaps of trust that are getting shored up. It's just producing a ton of health. And my hunch is you didn't know you were agreeing to that. I didn't know that was going to be what I was doing. I didn't know how many, booby traps there are out there. It's like I'm Indiana Jones, just trying to not get shot with an arrow or run over by a boulder or something. I didn't know the agility required to do this, because nobody was coming along asking. Just nobody asked. And when you start asking, you have to be prepared for what's going to come. I remember asking a pastor in town. We planted this church for 2 years. I meet with this pastor. I said, Pastor, I got to talk to you. He'd been here, he's kind of one of the elders in the city. Hey man, I really need some help. The amount of sexual brokenness that I'm encountering in the life of our church, in marriages, specifically with men, pornography, sexual addiction, it's really bad. And I don't know what to do. It's overwhelming, how broken people are. And I think porn is a real problem. And I don't know what to do. I don't know where to send. I mean, do we just send everybody to counseling? Do we, what do we do? And I'll never forget, he said, oh, Jay, there's just certain rocks you don't pick up because you don't want to know what's under there. And I was like, what? I mean, thousands of people in this church. And he's basically like, man, there's just some stuff you just don't even want to ask because you don't want to know. And I remember leaving that coffee meeting disturbed. That cannot be the right answer. But I get how you get there. And I'm just so proud of you guys. And to your point, we're not getting everything right. When you take on that kind of stuff, you have to learn a whole new set of skills and processes and ways of behaving that we don't have intuitions on. We don't have the agility required. So sometimes we're getting run over by the boulder, or we get shot with the arrow because we didn't know how to move quick enough to respond to that. But I'm just proud of our team, your leadership, the way you're serving, to just at least try. We're not going to ignore that. We're going to move toward that. We're going to have that conversation. We're going to notice something's not quite right here. I think over time, over generations, it's only going to make us healthier.
Yeah, I think that's really true. When we see somebody isolated, you can say, oh, that's just the way they are. But we've really committed as a movement to say, no, wait a minute, we're going to be family. We're going to be connected. Yes. And say, hey, tell me about it. You don't go to any of your area meetings. You don't respond to the census or give your 3%. That's
what's up?
Clarifying those expectations and asking a question. Tell me why you're not doing that.
Yep.
Has put us in a lot of difficult conversations. But many of them have been healing and moved the right way. There's more connection now in the Vineyard than there's ever been. And I think those conversations have been very helpful to say, hey, this is the expectation. Tell me why it's not happening. Or it looks like it. A lot of times it's quite it looks like you're not connected. Tell me about that.
Yeah, what's up? Maybe I missed something. It's okay. I mean, or maybe our accounting's not right. Or maybe there's another story here that I'm not aware of. You would know this. Maybe there might be someone listening who experienced this, but out of our first national conference, I just pulled the databases and just wrote every senior pastor that wasn't in a national conference. I just want to check. Is everything okay? Is there some way that maybe you couldn't afford it, or there's something wrong? I mean, just whatever. I don't know why. I just wanted to check in because this is kind of our family gathering. Is everything all right? And the responses we got out of that were really interesting. Like how many people felt like they were in trouble. Like, oh no, the principal called. No, you're not in trouble. We're family. You check in, you inquire when something's amiss, and it's okay. Or there was something going on. No, I am really mad.
Right.
I've been hurt. All the way down to, oh my gosh, I've been to every single one for 20 years.
And the one I didn't go to,
I'm like, no, it's okay. Everything's okay. But even just that light touch of inquiry, what's going on, created so much response. It was really telling. Like, wow, we have the bandwidth, we have the team to enable us to do that, and it's surfacing stuff that hopefully can make us healthy. So it's encouraging. I feel really encouraged by the work you're doing, and I just want to emphasize before I, bring us down for a landing. John, you and Joel and our whole team really have made massive sacrifices to do this work. It's cost us something, but man, it's producing health and a shot for future generations to be a healthier group of churches called the Vineyard. So I'm just so grateful for you. I'm grateful for your leadership, how much you've invested. I know it's cost you, it's cost your family, it's cost your church, but I think it's producing fruit. I think we're starting to see the first fruit, some of the harvest of that work over a few years. So it's really encouraging. I'm really grateful.
Well, thank you, Matt. And I've grown in this process. I feel like I've grown.
Yeah.
Being around the team that we have and around so many different people and so many places that are doing heroic stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like
it's encouraging. It's great. Well, I'm really grateful. And then out of this, we'll have some more resources. I'm sure in the show notes, we'll have some ways that people can follow up on some of the stuff we talked about here. But I'm really grateful, man.
The We Are Vineyard podcast is a production from the team at Vineyard USA. If you've been enjoying the podcast, here are a few ways you can help us. Leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Connect with us online for additional resources. Our website is vineyardusa.org, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Vineyard USA. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.